So, Dr. Emrul, what's up? How are you?
Not bad, just a little bit tired.
So, Trump just got elected. You predicted it, and he is threatening to impose 25% tariffs on all Canadian exports. Do you have anything to say about that?
Uh, a lot. You can see a lot of politicians, a lot of people and economists are talking about it. Obviously, I'm talking about this too with my students and everyone else. So I think that if it actually goes through, the effect would be catastrophic for both the countries. However, I personally think this is a mixture of knowing Trump, obviously, you know Trump very well. It's a mixture of policy and posturing. And given that, let's talk about policy first. Given that 75% of Canadian export goes to US, two-thirds of our GDP kind of depends on US right now. So if it actually goes through, it's going to be catastrophic, no doubt. You can already see Canadian dollar going down, and a lot of people are asking me, there is a USMCA plan, which is like NAFTA 2.0. Can Trump do this under this NAFTA's agreement? Technically, he cannot. It's a violation. But if you remember 2018, he did the same thing. Right? When he came for the first term, he kind of threatened again with tariff and everything, and we did not see a lot of changes. However, if it actually goes through, the effect would be catastrophic for both the countries.
What economic variables do you think are gonna come into play here?
That is a very good question. Actually, some of my students already asked me that. So some basic principle of macroeconomics we can use. How about this, Faiyaz?
Yeah.
Let me show you in our whiteboard when we go home.
Oh yeah, let's go.
Okay, so let's see the effect on Canada first. So I'm going to call this Can here. So if Trump actually imposes the tariff, so first of all, let's say this is the tariff or tax on export, on Canadian export. So obviously it will lead to lower export in Canada. So X means export here. And anyone who knows basic macroeconomics, they know that if I start drawing graphs, which I don't want to, it will lead to lower GDP. This is real GDP, and I have obviously lower employment that will further our unemployment. So generally, when the economy goes through a situation like this, your currency would depreciate. And if you look at the market right now, Canadian dollar has already gone down to about 1.4142 per US dollars. So there might be a long-term impact here too, which I will talk about that later. But let's see how Bank of Canada might react. Technically, Bank of Canada is generally concerned with inflation on average. So, however, if there is a serious effect on adverse effect on GDP and employment, there is a high chance that Bank of Canada might lower the interest rate. And when they lower the interest rate, it will have further depreciation of Canadian dollars. And with low export, this exporter might transfer into domestic, and there will be high domestic demand, which might lead to higher prices too. But imagine with this, Canada imports a lot of our GDP, right? A lot of our GDP comes from imports. So if CAD becomes depreciated, our imports might get expensive. So price of import, M means import, is expensive. That will lead to overall inflation in Canada. So look at this. Same situation that we are going through right now, isn't it? Like lower employment, lower GDP, and high inflation. Overall, we call this stagflation. So that's why I said the effect would be catastrophic for Canada if it actually goes through.
What about US?
For US, look, this is what I was saying. Like for US, whether they will go through or not. So let's see the situation in US of this kind of tariff. So for any country, a trade balance, let's call this net export, is always your export minus import. And you want this to be as high as positive as possible. So let's see what's the impact on this kind of net export for US effect. So for US, this tariff, they're increasing on import, right? So higher tariff on import will lead to lower import for sure. And why Trump or any other president or prime minister like him would impose this is to protect domestic import substituting industry. Right? So if that happens, so I would say that domestic demand, let's call this YD, domestic demand, will increase. And look, it happened before in a washing machine story in 2018 that we'll talk about that later, maybe in our discussion. But in this domestic demand, if it increases, obviously that will lead to higher prices for for consumers. And some people might say this tariff will lead to higher revenue, tax revenue for government, but we'll see later, does this actually happen in future? So in the short run, this is kind of the effect you might see. But now, Federal Reserve Bank of US, which is US Central Bank, if they want to tackle this inflation, most economists would predict they might increase interest rate further, right, to tackle the inflation. If they do it, that will lead to USD appreciation, and USD appreciation will slowly discourage people to export less from US. So look at the overall effect on net export. Your export would be lower. Your import would be lower immediately. So there may not be any changes in net export though. However, it's kind of pretty sure that prices will go up for sure. This is our summary. That prices will be higher, no doubt. Employment there, I'm guessing there would be a shift from in import substituting industry. Because of that, there will be high employment. And at the same time, let's say the export industry might lose job. So overall, employment, we don't know, because that also depends on Trump's immigration policy, which might lead to higher vacancy to unemployment ratio, which means more jobs. But I think employment situation would be lower, right? There would be lower employment, but anyway, we can't say this for sure. And we can see this from this particular equation, that the net export or trade balance might just stay the same. So no one can say, what Trump's impact might lead to lower trade balance. So what's the summary then? Our summary is our import substituting industry in US, they are definitely happy. They're probably the ones that voted for Trump. Export in US will never gonna be happy because of that, because USD might appreciate, how Fed might react. What about consumers? That's the most important thing. And Trump just promised that I'm gonna cut inflation, right? So we can clearly see it's not the case. Guys, whatever I'm saying is in short run. So consumers are also not happy, which is why whether US will actually go through this policy, and it's a posturing or policy, we will discuss next.
What kind of industry do you think will be impacted?
So, as I mentioned already, Faiyaz, that 75% of our export goes to US, which have been very alarming to me always. And I always thought Canada should diversify their export destination. So if you look at the number one product, crude oil, actually crude oil can be one of the retaliatory measure later. Lumbers, and then you have uranium. But the sector I want to talk about is auto, because you know how auto industry works, right?
Yeah.
So they don't come assembled, right? They get assembled in a certain place. Sometimes some kind of specific tools or whatever is used in a car, it goes around the border 6 to 7 times. So are you going to charge 25% tariff every time, right? So the auto industry will definitely going to be impacted, and which was a case in 2018 also.
Yeah. So let's see, what kind of retaliation can we see from Canada if this goes on?
Look, in terms of Canada is a really small country compared to US, and we are more dependent on US than US is dependent on us, right? So in terms of retaliation, that it's possible, but I would say it's risky.
Yeah.
For our viewers, by retaliation we mean that what our premiers are saying right now, which I am indifferent with. For example, let's say it's not, to be honest, a bad idea to show some kind of an strength, at the same time use some sort of a diplomacy. Right. So obviously Canada can say, we're going to stop sending crude oil to US. Then US have to find a good destination for crude oil also. So retaliation is possible, but I would say diplomacy is more important at this point.
Do we have any history, like any examples in the past that this happened, and do you have anything?
I have two, but one I won't say. That was like in 60s, right? 60s is for viewers, you guys can slowly Google and figure it out. It's the chicken versus another product between German and US, right? But the most recent one, just to let you know, whether this kind of tariff will actually work for US. The good example is 2018's when Trump imposed those tariffs. Obviously, he did not impose on everything because of good diplomacy by Canada at that time. So I would say, let's say washing machine, right? If you look at the data, according to Wall Street Journal, at Wall Street Journal, they said that tariff on washing machine actually earned about, I believe, $85 million of tax revenue. So listen, $85 million of tax revenue for US. However, guess how much consumer ended up paying? Remember my econ concept told you like
Yeah.
consumers will price will go up.
Uh-huh.
What's interesting, the tariff was imposed on washing machine, and why people impose tariffs to support your import substituting industry,
Yep.
right? So the washing machine companies will also have locally will have very high demand, and it's a pure econ concept. High demand leads to higher prices,
Yes.
and businesses are profit motived, right? They're capitalists, right?
Yeah.
So consumer, not only washing machine price went up, even though there was no tariff on dryer price also went up.
Yeah.
So consumer ended up paying $1.3 billion
Extra.
extra.
Damn.
So look, this kind of tariffs are used to create jobs, right? Jobs were created, but I believe, according to Wall Street Journal, it's about $850,000 per job created. So consumer paid $850,000. So for US, history says they are also going to suffer, right? Where Trump has promised to cut down inflation for consumers, they might suffer even more.
While we were driving over here, you mentioned policy versus posturing,
Yes.
right? And let's see how Trump is using this, why Trump is doing this, and also how do you think it relates to his broader goals, like illegal immigration
Yeah.
or like the war on drugs,
Yeah.
fentanyl, I guess.
Yeah.
Like,
Yes. And look, we know Trump very well.
mm-hmm.
When Trump was president the last time, I was really interested in US policy, just to be very honest. When Trump was gone, I wasn't. That doesn't mean I'm a Trump supporter, just to be very clear with the viewers. I actually do not even care, right? So, because it's funny, right? His political pushes, he's a businessman, right? It's really, really interesting. So I would say it's not even remotely close to a policy. For him, it's mostly a posturing. Okay, for the audience, what I meant by posturing is that it's a way of showing strength. So, I mean, it's kind of a bargaining chip for Trump, and we know Trump very well, right? So, US is a very strong country, so you want to show that strength right away to Canada that, you know what, behave, or we will charge tariff on you. If you read his tweet carefully, it clearly gives you the solution already, which is why I've been kept saying, even I said that uh, a couple of minutes ago, right, that the answer is not fiscal or monetary policy. That the economists will think about those anyway, right? What can we do if the tariffs are actually imposed on Canada? The answer is diplomacy. And if you notice what just happened, there's a December 17, just yesterday, right? Just yesterday that Canada just announced that $1.3 billion they're going to invest on border security, to strengthening border security and controlling the immigration and the other things, which kind of already gives you an idea that there is a backdoor communication or backdoor negotiation happening, which is exactly what Trump wanted. So which is why I still believe it's not a question of Canadian policymakers should focus on fiscal or monetary policy. They should focus on diplomacy instead. However, the only one of the biggest issue I see right now, our ex-finance minister from Liberal Party, Miss Freeland, she resigned. She was a very, very important party for Canada's negotiation in 2017 and 18. Even Trump tweeted something crazy about her because probably Trump doesn't like her, right? Because she negotiated a good deal, maybe. I don't know. So now it's a big question for the Liberal in power, that how they're gonna do this negotiation, how they're gonna do this diplomacy, especially when they lost 1/3 of MPs' support in the Senate. So diplomacy is the answer.